Imagine spending your entire life building a legacy, only to reach the age of 68 and finally reveal the five Hollywood giants you swore never to work with again, not because of jealousy, not because of ego, but because they showed you the darkest, most humiliating sides of fame. Dolph Lundgren, the cold, unbreakable force behind Ivan Drago in Rocky IV, once stood as a global symbol of power. The world saw him as unstoppable, but behind the spotlight were five men, five actors so toxic, so confrontational, so disrespectful that Dolph quietly carved their names into a private blacklist he carried for decades, and today he has finally revealed who they are. These were not outsiders, they were co-stars, they were collaborators. Some were even friends until they showed their true colors. They challenged him to real fights at Cannes. They rewrote scripts behind his back to boost themselves and erase him. They insulted him in public, mocked his talent, and pushed him out of final edits. And one of them humiliated him so deeply, Dolph walked off set and vowed never to share a frame with that man again. But the first name on that list, the most shocking, the most painful, is a man whose rivalry with Dolph became legendary long before either of them ever admitted it. When you hear who he is, you'll understand why this story still shakes Hollywood to this day. The very first name on Dolph Lundgren's blacklist is also the most famous one, Jean-Claude Van Damme. A man whose rivalry with Dolph didn't just simmer, it raged for decades. Their feud officially began in 1992 during the production of Universal Soldier. Producers believed pairing the Belgian superstar with a Swedish powerhouse would create box office magic. And in a way, it did. Just not the way they expected. Because behind the camera, the set felt less like a film production and more like an emotional minefield. Dolph walked onto the set with military precision, gear ready, lines locked in, attitude calm and focused. But Van Damme, he arrived like he owned the studio. He adjusted scenes on a whim, demanded retakes just to show off another high kick, asked for lighting changes so he would appear more heroic. Crew members later described the atmosphere perfectly. It felt like watching two lions staring across a field, waiting for one to make the first move. But the tension didn't boil. It exploded. Then came the moment that sealed their hatred forever. The infamous Cannes incident. In front of dozens of journalists, Van Damme stepped toward Dolph, chest out, eyes locked, and said something no one expected from a co-star. Come outside and finish it. A real fight challenge. No cameras, no choreography, just raw hostility. Many fans assumed it was a marketing stunt. It wasn't. Dolph later admitted privately to a Swedish magazine that if he had accepted the challenge, it wouldn't have ended well for anybody. And that was the moment their rivalry became legend. Decades later, during The Expendables 2, the tension still pulsed beneath every look, every shared scene. Van Damme pushed for creative changes. Dolph simply ignored him. They filmed together, but not once, not a single time did they share a casual conversation. The silence said everything. In 2018, when Dolph was asked if he would ever work with Van Damme again, he didn't hesitate. He didn't smile. He didn't soften. He simply said, "Why? What's left to prove?" And that's the truth behind their feud. Neither man ever backed down, so the wound never healed. If you thought the first feud was explosive, the second name on Dolph Lundgren's blacklist takes things to an entirely different level. Steven Seagal. People often joke about Seagal's legendary ego, but for Dolph, it wasn't a punchline. It was real, and he lived through it. Their conflict didn't start on a film set. It began during what was supposed to be a simple, professional meeting for a potential action project. Everyone expected a normal table read, scripts on the table, ideas exchanged, respectful discussion. Instead, Steven Seagal walked in like a storm cloud. He arrived wearing sunglasses indoors, a personal security guard standing behind him, and an attitude that practically shouted that he believed he invented martial arts. Before anyone could settle into their chairs, Seagal stared directly at Dolph and delivered the most outrageous greeting imaginable. "You should know I'm the top fighter here." That was his hello? Dolph wasn't angry, just stunned. Then Seagal added another line that made the entire room freeze. "I don't take hits on camera, ever." At that moment, Dolph knew exactly what kind of man he was dealing with. As the meeting went on, Seagal hijacked the room. He pitched himself as an unstoppable legend, demanding the script be rewritten so his character never struggled, never bled, never lost. Producers tried to remain polite, but Dolph sensed the embarrassment spreading across the room. One of them whispered, almost hopelessly, "He wants to be bulletproof." But the ego wasn't the only problem. The stunt performers later warned Dolph about Seagal's demonstrations, techniques that actually hurt people. One stuntman showed up the next day with a swollen wrist and muttered, "He said it builds character." That was the moment Dolph realized this wasn't a man he wanted to share a set with. Years later, Dolph summarized his feelings with a single, razor-sharp sentence. "Discipline impresses me, pretending doesn't. No hatred, no anger, just truth." From that point on, he told his team he would walk away from any project the moment Steven Seagal's name appeared. Studios tried pairing them multiple times in the years that followed. Dolph shut every door, without negotiation, without hesitation. This feud didn't explode, it quietly died before it could even begin. What would you do if a man you admired suddenly turned around and cut you down with a single sentence? For Dolph Lundgren, that man was Mickey Rourke, someone he respected, someone he believed carried real acting depth, someone whose presence on set could elevate an entire film. But that respect shattered in seconds. Their feud didn't erupt from one explosive moment. It grew slowly, painfully, like cracks spreading across glass, until one final insult split everything apart. It happened during a table read for their early 2000s action thriller, filmed in the freezing winters of Eastern Europe. The cast and crew still remember how difficult those conditions were. Icy mornings, breath fogging in the air, long nights that felt endless. And in the middle of all that hardship, Mickey Rourke's behavior became a force of chaos. He arrived on set carrying handwritten pages, long emotional monologues he insisted on injecting into scenes. Not tweaks, not refinements, entire paragraphs about trauma, Vietnam flashbacks, guilt, religion, none of which existed in the original script. Actors froze mid-scene because they had no idea how to respond to the sudden emotional detours. The tone changed every time Mickey opened his mouth. Dolph's scenes became unpredictable and messy because Mickey kept reshaping the emotional weight of every moment. Then came the night everything reached its breaking point. A tense two-man standoff scene was scheduled for 10 p.m. Everyone is ready, the cameras were set. Dolph stood in full costume, waiting, but Mickey didn't show up until 1:47 a.m., strolling into the freezing set with a cigarette hanging from his mouth, announcing, I needed to walk the city to get into character. 3 hours wasted, crew exhausted, Dolph freezing in silence. That was the night he snapped, quietly, firmly, telling the first AD, if he leaves again, shoot without him. A week later came the moment that sealed their fallout forever. During a blocking rehearsal, Mickey shoved the script supervisor aside and shouted, "Don't tell me how to feel a scene. I feel it when it hits me." Then he turned to Dolph, smirked, and said the line Dolph would never forget. Some guys act from instinct, others just flex. It wasn't teasing, it wasn't banter, it was humiliation, delivered publicly, deliberately. And when filming finally wrapped, Mickey Rourke skipped the promotional tour completely. No apology, no call, no acknowledgement. Dolph didn't say he hated Mickey, but he said something just as final. "We won't share a set again." The fourth name on Dolph Lundgren's blacklist isn't about ego battles or public insults. It wasn't a screaming match or a fight challenge or a dramatic on-set meltdown. It was something colder, quieter, more calculated. Tom Berenger didn't attack Dolph with words. He attacked him with edits, with rewrites, with a level of manipulation that struck at the very heart of Dolph's professionalism. Their conflict began in 2002, during the filming of a war action movie shot in Slovakia. The schedule was tight. The budget was modest. Dolph came prepared, disciplined, ready to elevate the material. But Berenger walked onto the set as if the entire production existed to orbit around him. Within the first week, something became very clear. Berenger wasn't just performing in the film, he was trying to reshape it. He began showing up with rewritten pages, always conveniently expanding his dialogue and trimming Dolph's. At first, the director tried to keep the piece, hoping it would settle down, but the crew noticed immediately. Every day, Berenger pushed for scenes to tilt in his favor, shifting emotional weight toward himself and away from Dolph. Dolph stayed calm, choosing professionalism over confrontation, until one night. A major confrontation scene was scheduled to shoot at an abandoned steel factory. The moment was supposed to be sharp, tense, fast, written to build momentum. But Berenger refused to film it unless he could deliver a long, emotional monologue he had written for himself, one that dragged on for nearly 2 full minutes, completely destroying the pacing the story depended on. It was no longer creative input. It was hijacking. Dolph finally stepped forward. He looked at the director and, with quiet frustration, said, "He's hijacking the film." Berenger said nothing, didn't argue, didn't defend himself. He simply turned and walked back to his trailer, leaving the entire crew frozen in awkward silence. But the worst blow came later. During post-production in Bratislava, an editor privately revealed that Berenger had requested the removal of several of Dolph's medium shots, cuts to Dolph's reaction close-ups, additional inserts of Berenger's face during shared scenes. In other words, he wanted the movie to feel like his solo performance, with Dolph quietly fading into the background. That was the line Dolph couldn't ignore. He completed his ADR sessions, walked out of the studio, and told his agent one final chilling sentence: "If Berenger signs a project, I'm not interested." He has never broken that rule, not once. The final name on Dolph Lundgren's blacklist isn't the loudest, or the most explosive, or the one with public showdowns. It's the quiet one, the subtle one, the resentment that grew over decades like a slow burning fire. Brian Thompson. Unlike the others, Thompson didn't challenge Dolph to a fight. He didn't shove anyone. He didn't rewrite scripts behind the director's back. What he did was more insidious. He chipped away, little by little, through sly comments, subtle insults, and years of whispered comparisons that cut deeper than any punch. Their tension goes all the way back to Rocky IV. While Dolph was dealing with overnight global stardom as Ivan Drago, Thompson was circulating a rumor in casting circles, saying he had also been considered for the role, and that he would have brought more depth to it. At first, Dolph brushed it off. Hollywood is full of noise after all. But Thompson didn't stop. Over the years, whenever they crossed paths at events, Thompson slipped in backhanded jabs, just loud enough for Dolph to hear. At one industry mixer, after a discussion about iconic villains, Thompson casually said, within Dolph's earshot, some roles are written flat. The actor can only do so much. Everyone knew exactly who he meant. It wasn't a joke, it was envy, disguised as casual conversation. Things escalated in the early 1990s during a table read for an action film. Thompson challenged every line that made him appear weaker than Dolph's character. He interrupted Dolph multiple times during rehearsals, arguing about blocking and camera angles. Then he dropped a line that hit Dolph harder than any physical blow. Let's not make this look like a weightlifting contest. A direct insult, a direct comparison, a direct attempt to undermine Dolph's talent. But the final straw came years later in the 2010s at Las Vegas Fan Expo. During a Q&A session, Thompson mocked Dolph's legendary line from Rocky IV, saying, I'd have delivered it with actual feeling. The crowd laughed, and within minutes, the moment reached Dolph backstage. He didn't explode, he didn't confront Thompson, he simply walked away from the public panel and did private signings instead, something he had never done before. From that moment on, Dolph didn't mention Brian Thompson's name. He erased it. No more collaborations, no more negotiations, no more chance of reconciliation. It never became a tabloid headline, but it's the feud Dolph carries the most quietly and the most permanently. So now you know the 5 names. 5 men who, in different ways, pushed Dolph Lundgren to his limits. Not with fists, not with stunts, but with ego, disrespect, manipulation, and quiet resentment. Jean-Claude Van Damme, the rivalry that turned into a near brawl at Cannes. Steven Seagal, the ego so large it ended a partnership before it began. Mickey Rourke, the talent Dolph once respected, until a single cutting insult shattered it. Tom Berenger, the man who tried to rewrite an entire film to erase Dolph from it. Brian Thompson, the quiet rival who used subtle digs and public mockery for decades. 5 different stories, 5 different wounds, but one truth. Dolph Lundgren didn't blacklist them out of rage, he blacklisted them out of principle. He has always believed in discipline, professionalism, and respect. Values rare in an industry built on ego and illusion. And at 68, he finally said out loud what he had held in silence for most of his career. Now the question becomes yours. Which name shocked you the most? And do you think Dolph was right to cut them out of his life for good? Tell me in the comments. Your thoughts shape the next story we uncover. And if you want more untold Hollywood drama, forgotten rivalries, and the secrets hiding behind the silver screen, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because in this town, every legend has a truth they've never told, and we're just getting started.